Hi, this is Fred Copestake, your host to the Selling Through Partnering Skills podcast. Based on the book, the podcast explores how sales professionals can use the power of partnering intelligence to take their selling to the next level. By combining the skills associated with better partnering and existing best practice, salespeople can ensure their approach is more modern and collaborative. There are 6 elements to PQ, and in each episode we look at how sales professionals have used these and how their insights can contribute to your success. And hello, welcome to this episode where we have Duncan Yellowlees, who is a presentation trainer and coach. Duncan is particularly specialist in the area of storytelling. And this is what we were talking about. And I got very, very interested in how salespeople can use stories when they're speaking, because I know it's a very hot topic and I know it's very effective. So I started to quiz him a hell of a lot on this and then realized that actually we ought to be sharing it. So he's very kindly agreed to come onto this podcast. So welcome, Duncan.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Fred.
So just before we start and very particularly look at storytelling and speaking around the elements of PQ, could you just tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a mishmash background. I refuse to be boxed. I did an engineering degree at Edinburgh and then a master's in science communication at Manchester. So that's the kind of education bit out of the way. But all the way through my time at Edinburgh, and actually for most of my life, I've done an awful lot of theatre and a lot of drama, performing. And then when I moved, Edinburgh's got a huge student theatre scene with the Edinburgh Festival Fringe and everything. And I stopped performing and started directing theatre pieces. And I directed stuff at the Fringe and realised that I like that side of things better, that I like, seeing putting an experience on a stage and trying to get the best performances out of actors and thinking about how sound and light and theatricality are going to combine to give the audience the experience I want them to get. And then, so after my master's, I would go, right, I've got a history master's and an engineering degree and I like theatre. What the hell do I do? Where do I go? And so I ended up in the sort of museums world at a science centre here in Newcastle, so a bit like the Science Museum in London with kind of hands-on science exhibits and that kind of stuff, training the staff there to deliver demonstration shows, blowing stuff up on stage and setting fire things and doing colour changing chemicals for audiences, and taking some of that knowledge from theatre and applying it to a more presenting type scenario. And from there, when I decided that I'd had enough of being employed, I set up my business about 3 years ago, and I help speakers do amazing talks. I help speakers identify what it is they want to do with their speaking, what's the goal, and to create talks that engage their audiences. Because, I looked around and I saw, particularly in the business world, an awful lot of speaking is dull. It's really dull. Some of it's great, some of it is really dull. But more importantly, I recognized that it was a powerful tool for engaging audiences, which I learned through working, in theatre and in the Science Museum, engaging audiences with complicated science. This is an incredibly powerful tool for engaging audiences in whatever it is you've got to say. And it isn't really talked about like that in industry and business or academia, where I also work, very much at all. It's kind of it's seen as a nice thing or a skill that you be handy to have, and it's good to have, but it's not seen as a powerful tool for, say, marketing or for sales. It's not something that companies tend to invest in, and I thought that they are missing a trick, because, as I say, it's, for my money, it's the most powerful way to engage audiences. And if you can do the right talk to the right 100 people in a room, you're going to get way more impact than any number of social media posts or tweets. A tweet is on somebody's screen for 2 seconds, something like that. Even if you're doing a 20-minute talk in front of an audience, 20 minutes in front of 100 people is 2,000 people minutes of engagement.
Yeah.
And you can't get that with social media at all without millions and millions of tweets and millions of followers. And I just think lots of people are missing a trick. So I set up the business to help people make the most of that and take advantage of it and learn the skills to use it well.
And this is what really interested me when we were chatting, in that it's not just presentation skills. Lots of salespeople do presentation skills, and I'll like myself to deliver a presentation skills workshop to get them to do the basics pretty well. It's where you're taking it and how this can be a tool for engagement, a tool to really position yourself and talk to your customer about what you can really deliver for them on a kind of, on a marketing scale, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of my stuff, all of my work comes from this basis of, if the people, and this is true for any marketing, right? Speaking or advertising or social media or a sales pitch or whatever, a big ad campaign, if the people you are putting it to aren't engaged, if they aren't listening and aren't paying attention, there's no point. There's fundamentally no point. And yeah, you can talk about like, subconscious imagery and you see things over and over, repetition, but there's fundamentally no point if they're not listening, if they're not engaging. So all of my material starts, how do we engage those people with whatever medium we've got? Speaking just happens to be my specialism, and within that, storytelling is one of the most powerful engagement tools. But you can't sell something to somebody if they aren't going to listen to you in the first place. If nobody is watching your advert, there is no point in putting it out there. We've all seen those adverts on TV, and some adverts are great and some are terrible. And when a terrible one comes on, you just tune out, you stop paying attention. You're not with it. You look at your phone, you do something else. When the good ones are there, you watch a little bit. So yeah, you've got to engage audiences, and speaking is just an incredibly powerful way to do that. Storytelling as a whole across the branding, but engagement, it's what it is. It's a way to engage people. It's not just a way for you to stand up and go, here's my thing, here's my product, isn't it great? Think about it as a tool to engage the people with you and what you do and who you are, and create memories around that they then carry with them into buying decisions and other elements of your customer journey.
Brilliant. And so what I want to explore really now is kind of how we can use some of your ideas, some of the concepts, in that a salesperson can sell themselves, and that they can position themselves to be somebody who's very modern, very collaborative, who uses these concepts of partnering skills, the PQ that we've talked about, to come across to the customer that, yeah, this person is interested. I will engage to then listen into more of the product presentation or the solution that they offer, and then more of a tactical presentation. That's kind of where I'd call that. So it's this kind of bigger picture area. How can speaking, storytelling, stuff from your world help salespeople to become better at what they do? I mean, that's something you said, you want to help people become better. Let's see if we can use 25 minutes to give some sort of ideas. I mean, let's start to go through the elements of PQ. So first element is about trust. So trust, the foundation of relationships. Trust helps with communication. Again, how could we use speaking? How can we use storytelling to start to get that idea across to people?
So trust is a lovely one, and if you work in sales, you're probably familiar with the phrase "people buy from people they know, like, and trust." And there are various sales equations that also, like, kind of more mathematical modeling of it, that include an element of trust. But actually, in that phrase, it's people buy from people that's the most important bit for me. And you trust people, you trust human beings. And I think we're seeing at the minute, your thoughts on this, Fred, would be really interesting, but I can sense over the last 5 years, decade, maybe, a shift in the way sales and marketing is kind of being approached, and there's a much more personal element to it. It's not sort of big faceless brands with products. It's more one-to-one, more personal, more engaged, more customer focused. And speaking is phenomenal for that, because you are a person standing up on stage, or indeed on a camera. You're a face, you're a human being, and the most effective talks are the ones that make use of your humanness. I'm going to trust you more if I think you are like me, or that you empathize with me or understand me. So just the fact that you're there as a human being speaking automatically gives you some of that trust. You also get trust attributed to you by the organization that's got you to speak. So imagine, Fred, you've gone off to a big sales conference, and there are a lot of other salespeople in the room, and you've been given the keynote. Okay, really nice, really flattering. But you take the stage for the keynote. Just by being on that stage, by being the person who stands up, it will grant you a bunch of authority, right? Because you're stood on a stage, so clearly you must know what you're talking about. The organizers of this event have seen fit to put you on a stage. Now, a lot of speaking events, actually, you can just apply, right? So you get granted this massive authority just by standing on stage, but to get to the point of standing on stage, just ask. Find the event you want to talk at and go and ask, can I come and do a talk? And maybe you won't get a keynote, but you'll get a small section and build up from there. But by being on stage in front of an audience will grant you a bunch of authority. You're not fighting to be heard over lots of different voices. You get 20 minutes just for you. And in a space where people already trust you. It's kind of like somebody going, I use social media as the equivalent because I kind of see speaking as social media live, but it's like a private Facebook group. You kind of like a private Facebook group where you're the guru who speaks, and people invite other people. That's what a room is like. Everyone goes, oh, Fred's talk sounds good. I'm going to go to that, and they automatically think you're going to be good because you're on the stage. You're leading the room, so you get a bunch of authority there, which can grant trust. On the storytelling side of things, I suspect an awful lot of the people listening use stories already, whether they think of them or not. Customer case studies we're very familiar with, and using case studies. Those are stories. Those are stories of this time when me and my product or my service helped somebody, and that somebody is just like you. And you're telling a little story of how your product changed the world of a person, and that person is exactly the same or similar to the customer who you're trying to sell to right now, because people resonate with other people. So in your customer sales case studies, the case studies you choose should be dependent on who you're talking to. Pick the case study best matched to the person in front of you. And that's storytelling. You know, they can see themselves in the shoes of the person in that case study, and therefore they can see how your product or service benefits them.
Benefits them. Let's verbally underline that one, because there could be the danger, couldn't there, that I'm on stage, I'm on screen, I've got this opportunity. Oh, let's talk about how great I am.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the point, is it? It's about, this is why this is interesting to you, and actually just looking at the elements of PQ, this is this win-win orientation. Yeah, I can help you, but you are getting this. I mean, the benefits for you are.
Yeah, it's got to be. And one of the things I see a lot in business talks is what I call the "this is what we do" talk. Right? This is what we do talk, and people will stand up and they'll go, "Hello, everybody. I'm Duncan. I have this company. We make widgets. Look at all the widgets we make. This is how we make the widgets. Aren't they marvelous widgets? What do the widgets do? Well, they do this. Look at all these logos we've worked with." There's a big slide full of logos. Look at all the logos we've worked with. Aren't they impressive? Maybe if they're really on the ball, there'll be a quote from a customer or something like that. But fundamentally, it's to talk about them. And quite often you'll have other elements of the "this is what we do" talk. So the "this is where my journey started." So my business started back 5 years ago, and we've built it up. Aren't we great? Aren't we marvelous? We're now a £1 billion turnover business, whatever. And the thing about that is nobody gives a toss. Fundamentally, nobody cares. And this is one of the things I find, and it's really hard to do, to accept that, I think, particularly as a business owner or somebody who's very integral and put lots of time and emotional investment into a product or a business. It's hard to put the ego aside for a minute and recognize that nobody really cares about you. And when you're speaking, if you do that talk, you'll see audiences zone out. Those of you who are listening, go and watch webinars, go watch talks. And when you see a "this is what we do" talk, pay attention to the other faces on the screen or the other people in the room, and you'll see phones come out. You'll see people starting to zone out. The talks that don't do that are the ones that orientate it as a customer first thing. So in the same way that social media, when content marketing works well, when you put out stuff that is useful to the people watching, speaking works well when what you're talking about has some value for the listener. Now that could be entertainment value. You could just give them a fun 20 minutes that they've enjoyed themselves, but giving tips, giving useful thoughts. So I often say, so Fred, you're a sales trainer. I would say if you were giving a talk, throw in a couple of quick and easy to use tips that they can go away and use immediately, right? It makes their life better. They feel like they're getting value and they're going to be listening. So we only engage with stuff if we want to listen. We're only going to listen, A, if I'm enjoying it and I want to participate, but also B, if I see some sort of value in it. If I want to learn how to build a bridge, I'll go and watch a YouTube video about building a bridge. I won't go and watch a YouTube video telling me how great this bridge that has already been built is. Right? If I want the value of the thing, and I want to learn some stuff. So yeah.
So what's your opinion then? If a salesperson is telling a story, so it's talking about how they've worked with other operations, I've heard it called the NASCAR slide. Because of like all the logos like stuck on the side of a racing car, but if they're talking about how they collaborate, because one of the areas that we're trying to get salespeople to really promote about themselves is that sales is becoming more collaborative than ever. Interdependence is one of the PQ elements, and so the story or the talk, the content would have to include how they've collaborated with people. Would that make sense? Would that be interesting to an audience, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. But only because the audience you have to do it in a way that means the audience can see themselves in that partnership. So you're telling a story of how you and I collaborated, say, Fred, but when we do that, what I want the audience to be doing is getting something from that. So they're either putting themselves in your shoes and going, oh, if I collaborate with Duncan, it's going to look like this, and we're going to have this process, these sorts of results. Or by telling a story about our collaboration, we can highlight things about the way we work that are going to be of interest to them. So maybe we have a working style that's a bit different, or we spend an awful lot of time doing discovery work with each other, working out actually what matters, what's important, and we drill right down to the roots of that. I've got a client, a marketing client, who spend an awful lot of time going and researching their target audience, and they do focus groups and that kind of thing. If they're doing a talk about collaborating with any partner and they spend some time they can use that story about how they work to show positives about how they work, I think is what I'm getting at. You can use those sorts of collaboration opportunities to tell your audience how you work, but those are carefully curated to be the hows that your audience is going to respond well to.
Yeah, so if I was talking to a bunch of sales directors, I wouldn't talk about how great I am and I've traveled the world and I've done all these wonderful things. It's when I talk to a sales director, quite often this guy is feeling the pain of, or he is trying to achieve these things. And so the sales director who's in the audience goes, oh, yeah, I know what that guy will feel like because I've got the same. I mean, in a very simplistic way.
Absolutely. And
spin the story that way around.
Exactly, and spin or framing, as I call it, the same kind of thing.
Spin has negative connotations.
Yeah, it does. Because you said there, right? You wouldn't say, I'm great, I travel around the world doing this. But if you framed traveling all around the world as you make the effort to go and see your clients and to spend time with them and to get to know them on their turf, on their patch, that's saying exactly the same thing. You travel around the world, but it's framed in a way that sounds positive to your clients. It also gives you a bit of humble brag. So salespeople and speakers in general often feel the need to kind of boast and big themselves up. I try and encourage everybody who's speaking not to do the whole the NASCAR slide, right? The slide full of logos. Don't do that. Don't just shout about how great you are, but do humble brag. So you saying, yeah, I travel around the world because I want to get to know my clients well. I want to see them on their patch. That has this positive framing, but it does let your audience know that you're an international trainer, right? The humble brag is there. It's subtle. If audiences don't like arrogance, they don't like people tooting their own horn, but you can drop those authority things in. You can, I worked with this client who, when I worked with Intel, humble brag, dropping a big name. Just as an aside, people will pick it up and notice it, but you don't spend too much time on it.
Interesting. Humble brag for the win. Right. Okay. Good point that. Think about another element of PQ then. And I guess we're kind of, it is all linked. This is one of the themes that I found with doing the podcast. People quickly pick up on that. Oh yeah, all this stuff's joined. Well, yeah, it is. And that's the concept of self-disclosure and feedback. So this is another thing that people who are good at partnering will do, is they will give information about themselves, but they will give it in a certain way rather than look how great I am, but just to help people understand them better. Again, I suspect that storytelling is a fantastic way to get quite almost personal information across that can only benefit the relationship.
Yeah, 100%. This kind of circles back to trust, or that people bit in people know, like, and trust. Well, all three elements are your disclosures, personal stories, personal anecdotes, hit all three of those things, right? Because you can do stuff that makes you look like a human being, a person. You can have stuff in there that you think is going to make the audience like you, and you can have maybe a humble brag or something in there that makes the audience trust you. So you'll see it if you look around, if you start watching YouTube videos of pitching competitions and that kind of thing. They follow a lot of them follow a pattern, which annoys me for different reasons, but a lot of them will include a personal anecdote, and that personal anecdote will have several elements, one of which is self-deprecating humor. So the self-deprecation bit, that I made a mistake, I did something that was a bit embarrassing, I messed up, ooh, look at me, right? If you do it badly, it's awful, but that's true for any speaking. When done well, it makes people think that you're not separate to them. So again, we don't like speakers who seem arrogant. We don't like speakers who seem to put themselves on a pedestal and that they have all the answers. We'd rather have people who are down to earth, who are human, and making mistakes is human. It's one of the reasons that I say to speakers, it doesn't matter if you mess up, right? If you get your words wrong, or you pause, or you drop your microphone on your foot, it doesn't matter, because if you are confident enough to work with it, it shows that you are human, and your audience will love you for that. So personal anecdotes are great. Personal anecdotes also often used to show investment in the thing. So I'm thinking of an example here about it was a company that was launching a hotel app, I think, for finding different hotels, and their personal story went something like this. It went, when I was 18, I did a tour of the world, and I traveled around, and we stayed in lots of awful hotels, and we couldn't find these things. I had this problem where I couldn't find the thing that I needed, and it was terrible. Here's some pictures of the terrible hotels and the cockroaches and all the rest. And I thought, well, I need to solve that problem. So I set out to build a thing to help other people solve the problem, right? It's a very sort of cliche thing to do when done badly, but can be done well to show how invested you are in the product, but more importantly, in the customers and in their problem. It's showing that you know where they're at, showing you know what it feels like to be in their shoes. That's one of the kind of powerful elements of personal anecdotes, as well as this humanness. I'm just like you, I make mistakes, I mess up, sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. And one of the most powerful things you can do on that side of the fence is show emotion. Showing that you are showing a time that was upset, or sharing a time with the audience when you didn't know what you were doing, or you were a bit lost, or you were confused, or you weren't sure. Like entrepreneur speakers get asked to do keynotes, like successful entrepreneurs get asked to do keynotes all the time. And the ones that are rubbish basically come out and go, yes, I started out, I made a company, and the company was great, and now we make $1 billion and it's fabulous. Boring story, really boring story. Heroes, if we're using classic storytelling language, heroes must have a low point, we have ups and downs, they must have a crisis of conscience, and sharing those moments with your audience, sharing moments when you weren't sure what was going on. That self-disclosure builds trust, but also builds a sense in your audience that you are self-aware enough to know your foibles, to know the things that are tricky, to know, because if you go into a partnership with somebody, or with a group of sales directors or whatever, and you breeze in and you say, this is going to be fabulous, it's all going to be perfect, everything will be fine, a straight line story, they won't believe you. They go, no, that's not how the world works. If you go in and go, okay, I'm experienced, I've done this a lot, we're going to get where we need to go, these are the issues I suspect we're going to hit along the way, and I'm experienced in dealing with them, and I know what's going to come up. That's a much more compelling and interesting story, because it mirrors their truth a lot better.
I've made a note here while you were talking. When you said hero storytelling, now this is something that I get very excited about. And I think you've just given us a very, very sort of brief summary of a hero story there, about sort of having to face the challenges along the way. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit, please? A little bit, because I know this stuff, we could go on for a long time, because I think this is probably quite useful when we're talking about change. And that's a really important part for salespeople. We're selling change as often as not. And so I think storytelling and maybe hero, or maybe there's a better version and I'm put all my eggs in the wrong basket here, because I'm a big fan of Hero's Journey. But could you just elaborate on that a bit, please?
Yeah, of course. So for anybody who doesn't know, Hero's Journey is a pretty classic storytelling structure, and it looks kind of like a circle, with like the top quarter of the circle is cut off, and that is the world. We start at the top of the circle in this top little slice, horizontal slice. Maybe Fred will put a picture out with the podcast so you can see what I'm talking about. But basically, the hero starts in the world that they know. Something prompts them to leave that world, some sort of need, or that they get pushed out. If you think about Frodo in Lord of the Rings, we start in the Shire. It's a world he knows, he's happy with it, it's great, but something prompts him to leave. That threat of needing to get the ring somewhere else prompts him to leave. And basically he steps out of the world they know into the world they don't know. And in the world they don't know are various challenges and risks and dangers and things to be overcome. And the hero sets out overcoming all of these challenges. In doing so, they grow as a person or a hobbit, and become better or learn some skills. This is exactly the same structure as the Lion King as well, right? Simba starts out in the world he knows, happy and comfortable, and then his dad dies and he has to go out into the world he doesn't know and faces challenges, and then grows as a lion and becomes king. But basically the hero returns back into the world that they know, better able to deal with whatever it was that caused them to leave in the first place, to tackle whatever problem it was, or having resolved that issue. And along the way, there are other archetypal characters. In the hero's journey, we often get so in Lord of the Rings, that's Gandalf. In The Lion King, that could be Rafiki or Timon and Pumbaa to some extent. The characters along the way that help the hero overcome the challenges, and that magical helper often has a skill set or knowledge that the hero doesn't have. Think about Gandalf's a wizard, got the magic. And I think Fred really likes this structure because as businesses and salespeople, you can plot customers and product and yourself into various characters in this journey, in this structure. So you can either plot your customer as the hero, which is a very classic thing to do and works very well, going, this is the world you're in at the minute, you've got this problem, but there's an issue. If you come with me on a journey, we'll have these challenges, we'll tackle some of these things, and we'll go back into your world and you can deal with whatever problem you've got. In that setting, you, the salesperson or the coach or the trainer, are casting yourself as the magical helper. In more product-based things, you can cast your product as the magical helper. Sillet Bang, Barry Scott, well, actually, Sillet Bang is probably the hero. It gets rid of the germs, and Barry Scott is the helper, the enabler. But you can cast the product as you, the customer, the hero. You've got this problem with an unclean house. Here is a magical helper in terms of a product that can help you. So you can kind of do that. There are lots of other storytelling structures out there in terms of change, organizational change, and getting people to change. I quite like, there's a structure from the Duarte company, which is a big presentation comms company in America. Nancy Duarte came up with a structure she calls the presentation form, which is very good. Go and look it up. It's about showing contrast between the world your customer is in now and the world they could have. So if you're working with a company, your sales are here, people aren't happy, but if we make some changes and we do some stuff, here is the world we could have. And you basically make the person want this glorious future that you painted a story of. It's a fictional thing. You get them to imagine it. You paint this beautiful picture. You get them to want it. And how do they get there? Oh, well, they work with you. And that gets them from where they are to where they want to be.
Yeah, and that's a very useful one for salespeople as well. I mean, I love Hero's Journey, but the Dwarf, the presentation form, you call that?
Yeah.
It fights against the enemy status quo. Not the rock band. The don't do anything. So if you don't do anything, you're at that bottom point rather than this compelling, great, beautiful future vision type thing that funnily enough is another part of PQ, the future orientation. So again, using stories, things which are creating that sort of that vision, that place that we can be, again, very, very helpful for people to do that.
Yeah, and that's the real power of stories is because we're imaginative, right? Human beings are wonderful, brilliant, imaginative creatures. We can paint these fabulous pictures in our heads, and the more detail those pictures have, the stronger you invest in them. So if you're standing on stage and you want to tell a story of a glorious future, or how your customers' lives will be changed if they take up your service or your product, get them to imagine that story. You know, you can be as blunt as, imagine 5 years time. You've been working with us for 5 years. We've made some of these changes. This is what it looks like. You can be that blunt, and what will happen is your audience starts picturing that thing, that vision in their head. And you go into storytelling mode. You give them enough detail that it's nice and rich, but enough blanks that they have to fill the blanks in themselves. If you just put up an image, that gives them all the detail all at once, and they don't have to work so hard to invest. They don't invest as much in this image that they're painting in their heads. So using the human ability to imagine stuff and invest in whatever you've imagined. I mean, we've all dreamed about this. I'm in the process of buying a house. I'm daydreaming and painting pictures in my head of the ultimate house and what it'll be like to live there. And I know that the more I do that, the more frustrated I'll be, because the houses I actually see in real life will not match up to the thing I've invested in my head. You've all experienced investing in a picture you've created in your head, giving prompts to your customers or to your audience to create that picture themselves and to buy into it and see you as the way they get from where they are to that image is an incredibly powerful thing to do.
Yeah. So you need to stop watching Selling Sunset or whatever that program's called. But no, there's some fantastic information there, because again, I've sat through in the past, I've probably done, and maybe still do, very much a kind of, here is the future. I mean, that's a pretty good presentation anyway, saying this is what it could look like. But what you're saying is you can be cuter by almost holding back on that and saying, let's imagine, just think. Or if we're in more of the discovery mode, tell me about what is your future. Then potentially go back and, you've done your homework, hopefully you've done your bit of future scoping, you've sort of said, well, I've had some ideas around it. But use that power of that huge human imagination to let people have a bit of a daydream. Yeah,
absolutely. And I really like what you said there about asking them. Coming back to know, like, and trust and customer-driven interactions, right? If so many times I see stuff fall apart because the assumptions of the salesperson or the assumptions of the speaker are incorrect. They haven't done their homework. They've assumed stuff about a future. The client wants a future, and it's not. And they paint this picture, but it's not the future the client actually wants. It can be, you can make this thing sound as glorious and wonderful as you want, but if it's fundamentally not what the client wants, they're not going to buy into it. So I'll always do this sort of process by spending a lot of time thinking about it. Discovery, if you can, talk to them, get their input. If it's more of a facilitated kind of discussion session, I would get them to build the future, right? So I do this sometimes. If you got a room, you get some sort of activity to get input from them, and you draw it, or you put post-it notes up or whatever. You get them to build the future, and you tie together the disparate elements to make the thing. That makes, not only are they invested because they've imagined it and they're thinking of it, they're invested because it's theirs. It's not a thing you're telling them they should want. It's the thing they've decided they should want. And there is a balance here, because people don't always know what they want. And so you kind of walk this tightrope of not going, you should do this, you should know this is where you should be, why aren't you there, get on the horse, come with me and do it, is up the hard end. And the other end is just going, well, what do you want? Go and get that. We walk this, right? And neither of those approaches really work, because what do you want? Go and get that. And people go, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't know what I want, help. And up the other end, people get resistant because they're like, why are you telling me what I want? I don't need that. That's not my thing. So yeah, we walk this kind of tightrope between those two extremes, and different audiences need us to be at different places, and different projects need us to be at different places along that tightrope. But it's about creating a vision they can believe in. And internal organizational change is this as well, right? If you want to get people on board with any sort of change, you have to get them to believe in the world after the change, and believe that they want the world after the change. And it's better to do that, I'd say, as a positive. Your life will be positive in this way after the change, rather than focusing too much on the negatives. The world is crap because we haven't made a change yet. You need a bit of both, because the contrast is what makes it powerful, but it's a better thing if it's a positive feeling rather than a running away from something negative feeling. It's going towards a positive thing rather than leaving something negative.
Wow, this is excellent stuff. But this is what modern collaborative skilled salespeople can do. You know, they will strike that balance. They'll be able to manage that conversation, and they don't go in and just say, right, this is where you need to be. Equally, it's just tell me about. Well, tell me about something I don't even know, I haven't thought about. It's just getting that balance right and then working together on it. So, well, we can work together on it. Let's collaborate. Let's get involved, as you say. So, and people are far more invested. Interesting stuff. Look, we could go on and on into the future, just chatting about this and some of the tools and techniques and things which people can do for that. And so, just before I ask you how people can get in touch with you and how you can help them with that kind of, you know, that kind of visioning, that kind of, well, storytelling, all the bits you've talked about, actually, because there's actually quite a few different elements that you mentioned there. But your future, where are you going? What's happening next for you, apart from the house on Hollywood Boulevard or wherever it was?
Yeah, the house in the Hollywood Hills with a 80-foot swimming pool.
Not the boulevard, up in the hills.
Because I have a cool 8 million sitting around. No, what's next for me? So there's a couple of things coming up. I'm going to get an online course up and running that people can access this stuff. So currently I train in person for groups, but I'm keen to get access to that for individuals rather than just groups, so people can have a look at that. That should be up and running in the next month or so. And I'm also looking to work with more speakers, more people who want to do things a little bit differently, maybe brands who hold themselves apart, who like to think that they're a bit different, to take that difference and put it on a stage, right? So if you are a brand who does things differently and thinks differently and is creative, are you still standing up and doing talks and presentations that feel kind of the same as everybody else? That's a mismatch for me, and I'd be excited to help make that work. But yeah, also anybody who's in that place where they're struggling, they've got a talk coming up and they're struggling to put it together and work out what the thread is, what's the flow, what's the story you're telling here. That's the bit that I'm really good at, is finding threads, finding ways through. You know, you've got a whole bunch of information you want to tell people, a whole bunch of customer stories, a whole bunch of this, that, and the other. Which bits do you choose? How do you do them? What order do they come in? And that's important for presentations, but also for marketing campaigns and that kind of thing.
Interesting. And so, how do we get in touch with you for that then?
So the best way to get in touch with me is probably on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. Duncan Yellowlees is a unique name, so you can just search me and Google me. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter. I also have a website, duncanyellowlees.com, and a YouTube channel as well. The YouTube channel is full of, coming on for 60 videos now, of various little presentation tips. They're just short things. Last year I did a video week, so 50 videos of a presentation tip. Me pulling out, I've got a mason jar full of presentation tips, and I pull a tip out and talk to it for 2 minutes, and that's the video. So if you want to dip in and out or want some inspiration or ideas about things, that's a good place to start. So find me on YouTube, get in touch with me on social media, or my email, which is on my website. And yeah, I'd be delighted to chat.
Brilliant. We will we'll pop the details into show notes and stuff as well. So people will be able to get in touch with you like that. But no, that's fantastic, Duncan. That is so interesting. I could go on. I mean, you know, when we chatted, I love this whole concept of storytelling. But you're very generous with your time.
It's been
thank you so much.
It's great. It's been a pleasure, Fred. Thanks so much. I just, you know, as I said at the start, I think this is a really powerful tool for marketing and sales, and it's rarely seen that way. It's seen as kind of CPD and personal development rather than as a powerful tool people can use to actively achieve stuff. And I'd like to kind of change that.
Brilliant. Thanks again.
No worries. Thanks, Fred.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Selling Through Partnering Skills podcast with me, Fred Copestake. If you liked it, why not leave a review? If you didn't, also leave one. Remember, it's all about the feedback. If you want to learn more about your own PQ, why not go to the book website, which is www.throughpartnering.co.uk, and there you can take a little self-audit. And of course, if you want to get in touch to talk about how you can use partnering skills, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So until next time, keep thinking about how you can adopt a more modern and collaborative approach to selling by selling through partnering skills.